Hi there, I'm Lewis, and today we're going to make historical foods. Hi there, today we are going to be making food from the World at War era. This era is loosely defined throughout the 1930s to the 1950s. The 1920s are over, the stock market has crashed, and overseas Europe is fighting a war. Back in America, men were being drafted, and food began to drastically change due to rationing rules. Each American was given a ration book that allowed people to get a specific amount of rationed items. Items like this included sugar, meat, coffee, and canned foods. This also meant many Americans could use as much fruit or vegetables as they wanted. Food during this era is very throw it in a pot and very simple. Things like casseroles, pan dishes, crock pots, and just other pan meals became popular for how quick they were and how easily they were thrown together with minimal ingredients. Again, these quick and easy meals were very popular, and as the war led to more preserved foods, canned foods started to appear on shelves, making it very easy to just open a can, throw some corn in a pot. Today, I'm going to be making some meatloaf, Jello salad, and a kind of assortment of potatoes and green beans. Meatloaf is not really a 1930s and 40s food, it's distinctly a 50s food, mostly because, again, meat was being rationed, and by the time the 50s came, people could finally eat meat again. They really just went insane. But, let's get into it. Jello salad was a very popular dish during this era, as it was often brought to parties or picnics as a way to show off. These were very novel items that could be made by people if they had fridges or extravagant Jello molds. Most Jello salads weren't made for taste, but rather appearance. Many salads were made by throwing random canned foods into the Jello. To make this version of Jello salad, strain canned pineapple. Put the pineapple juice, along with a cup of water, in a pot and boil. Then add the Jello packages and stir until the Jello has evaporated. Then mix mayo, evaporated milk until smooth. And then, 1 cup of cottage cheese and the physical canned pineapples, along with some walnuts, into the mayo milk mixture, which is something I never thought I would say. And then add the Jello from the pot and place in a fancy pan or any pan and wait for it to solidify. Jello salads were such a big trend that a lot of companies started to produce different Jello books. A lot of people also made their own recipes. I found this recipe from someone's grandma, so thank you, that person's grandma. Meatloaf was a popular dish as it was very cheap and convenient to make. The meaty dish was very filling and could easily pair with other staple foods of the time, like green beans or mashed potatoes. Meatloaf also helped solidify the nuclear family, as the meal itself is a very homey thing. Meatloaf also became popular as, during the war, meat was heavily rationed, so being able to make an entire loaf using just canned beef was a new thing, and a lot of people wanted to abuse that factor. Meatloaf is also a very simple dish to prepare, allowing for normally a wife to prepare it, put it in the oven so that way it's ready for when her kids and husband get home. To make meatloaf, Worcestershire sauce, an egg, and potentially other spices like garlic powder, although meatloaves aren't traditionally heavily spiced. Once that's all together, you can top the meatloaf with whatever you like ketchup, chili sauce, or really any kind of condiment seasoning. Then pop the meatloaf in the oven for an hour, and wait till the internal temperature is 160, because that's when you don't get sick from eating meat. Dice onions and bread. In a bowl, mix together ground beef, the breadcrumbs, the onion. Vegetables were a very popular side dish in both the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. It's really a food that's been able to stay the same, and that's for a few reasons. One is vegetables are just easily paired with things, and at this point we had a great understanding of different types of vitamins and the importance that you can get from different kinds of vegetables. Along with that, vegetables like potatoes are very filling, allowing people to eat not that much of them and still feel satiated. And finally, they were very popular during the 1930s and 40s, as vegetables were one of the few items that were not rationed during the war. In fact, Americans were very much encouraged to grow their own vegetables in freedom gardens. In having discussions with different people I know from this era, they said that they would rarely eat meat during the 1930s and 40s due to rationing, so most meals had to include vegetables in order for them to still feel full. As canning started to grow in popularity, more people started to buy canned vegetables, as it was a more shelf-stable alternative to buying vegetables and having them go moldy. I chose to do green beans and mushrooms for a few reasons. I chose green beans as they were one of the most popular of the canned foods. Along with that, during the 1940s, they were very easily grown in freedom gardens. Potatoes started to become very popular in the 1950s as they were yet another commonly rationed food. So if you weren't growing them in your own freedom garden, it was very unlikely that you would be able to get them. The preparation for both of these dishes are fairly simple, as it's mashed potatoes. You boil potatoes and then you mash them. And for the green beans, just let them simmer in water for a bit before. And there you have it, the during and post World War II diet. This diet prioritizes simple foods and very practical foods. As the war went on, food became more processed. This was mandatory as people had to have it away so cans could be shipped abroad without risking mold, spoilage, or things getting in. Canned food started to fill up shelves, and some of the first highly processed foods really started to come out around this time. These foods often took a few minutes to prepare, either boiling it over a stove or cooking it in a pan. This era is also defined by very classic and homey foods, specifically foods from the 1950s, things like casseroles and meatloaf. While there's a very stark contrast between 1930s and 1950s foods, these eras are often lumped together as a lot of food from the 30s or a lot of the missing foods from the 30s and 40s traveled into the 50s. So these two eras often just led into each other. I would like to say in a personal interview with my grandparents who were alive during the 1930s and 40s, they said that meat was very rare to come by, and in fact my grandma said that they only ever ate meat dishes on Saturday. So food was very different throughout the three eras, but this era gets a lot of people nostalgic. So let's dig in. So here we have the food spread. So let's try this. Starting off with the meatloaf. It's a loaf of meat. It's not a lot to it. It really is just like eating cooked ground beef with a bit of ketchup. The onions add a nice crunch to it. And you can't really taste you can have the bread flavor, but you can't feel the bread in your mouth, which is nice. But overall, it's good. Except the mashed potatoes. They're good. They're mashed potatoes. Again, they're a bit bland. There is, as you could see in the video, there wasn't a whole lot of seasoning in it. It was really just milk and butter and a bit of salt. But for that, they're good. Except the green beans. They really taste like mashed green beans. Well, no, not mashed, canned. They're very soggy. They have that soggy texture, that slightly wet texture from the butter and also the soaking process. Overall, this meal is pretty good. It's very kind of Thanksgiving family meal. And I enjoy it, personally. I think it's good. Again, just a bit bland. There wasn't a whole lot of seasoning used. But now, it's time for the best part. The Jello salad. Bon appetit. Oh. I hate to say it, the taste isn't even that bad. But Jesus Christ, that texture. I mean, really, the Jello flavor strongly comes through. And the pineapple juice helps that flavor come through. And the cottage cheese adds a texture that I can only hope no one experiences. And the crunch of the walnut just makes it all terrible. Thank you to whoever's grandma wrote this. Oh God. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please let me know. And next era, the current, 60s to 80s.